Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today we're going to be discussing the newest poll to come out of Alaska and really the first true poll of the 2020 Alaska Senate race. It also covers the gubernatorial election, so we'll briefly step in on that. Now, before we even look at the numbers, I want to briefly say Public Policy Polling, the group which conducted this poll, has a tendency to lean towards the more liberal end of the political spectrum as opposed to conservative. Now, I will note the challenger to the incumbent senator, Dan Sullivan, a Mr. Al Gross, is an independent, so I'm not sure. So they will swing towards him in this case. So even though I'm describing him as an independent, he is as good as a Democrat in this race because he won't caucus with the Republicans. Think of him similar to the independent senator from Maine. Now, looking at this, Alaska is competitive in all three of its elections from the looks of things. It's competitive in the Senate, competitive in the presidency, and competitive in the House. Oh, and also competitive in the governor's mansion. Competitive in the governor's mansion because it looks like they may recall him. So rather than going through the full results, we'll just look at their little summary here to keep things brief. But initially, so first off, for the presidential election, we see Joe Biden is behind Donald Trump 48-45. But Joe Biden is heavily leading with independent voters by over double digits. We're talking 13 points here. This is not a good sign for the president. The fact Joe Biden has made Alaska this competitive, even if it is a public policy poll, so we'll assume that Donald Trump it's typically in the case of the Democrats end up with more points than them getting the Republicans wrong, so we'll say Joe Biden's probably around 42 right now. But even if it comes out to anywhere close to this number, a 5-point difference, Trump breaks 50. That's not a good sign. You don't want your Alaska race to be close. This is like, because Alaskans have always been a safe bet for the Republican Party. You have a lot of people who don't like the federal government being involved in anything, and the Republicans are the guys who say we're not going to be involved in anything. So for Joe Biden to be this close to Donald Trump, that is not a good sign for Donald Trump, and a great sign for Joe Biden. Maybe he is just that sort of nice middle ground, I'm going to keep things simple and not painful, that the country is looking for right now, especially since we can expect this coronavirus to last until November. So, great numbers for Joe Biden, awful numbers for Donald Trump. Enough that I'm thinking I'm going to have to move Alaska to probably a leans Republican on my next presidential election prediction map. As for the Senate, I've been saying this for a while, but I'm glad to be proven right with the polling. Right now, the current senator, Dan Sullivan, is leading his opponent, Gross, 39-34. These are awful numbers for the incumbent. As an incumbent, someone who everyone knows, keep in mind, only a quarter of Alaskans have no opinion about Dan Sullivan. This means they may not know who he is. This means they may not have heard about him, or they may just not pay much attention to politics. But the fact he isn't even breaking 40%, and also on those previous polls we had that were done with him, he was not polling high, but virtually everyone knows who he is. We're talking over 70% of voters know who he is. He's polling within 5 points of his opponent, who is unknown. 72% of voters say they have no opinion about him. That doesn't mean they don't know who he is, but it means he hasn't given them enough to go off of. The fact that he already has, with basically literally everyone who approves of him is saying they're for him, everyone with no opinions just not showing up right now, that is really bad, to the extent Alaska is a lot more competitive than I thought it was. We're talking tilt Republican competitive. When your senator is doing this badly, like at least Heidi Heidkamp in 2018 was polling in the high 40s most of the time against her opponent who she lost to. He's polling at 39% with an incumbent senator, or an incumbent anything. When you start off your race, your numbers never go up. They may not go down, but they never go up. I have never seen an incumbent end up higher than their initial polling. To use an example, Gary Peters in Michigan. He's now back up to where he started polling. He was a very safe seat. Then he went likely, leans, tilt, then went back, leans, likely, and now he's safe again. Why? He went back to his old cap. He went down, he went up, but he didn't break his cap. That is very true for every incumbent. And on average, you won't go higher than your original cap. That's why the presidential race is looking so poorly for Trump. If he didn't have the Electoral College, this would be over for him right now, because his cap right now is about 43%. So Sullivan has seemingly, and this is compared with previous polling done too, is at a strong 39% in the state. Now, there's a lot of undecideds, so they could come out and turn out for him. I'm not saying polling caps reflect election day votes, but that's not good, because this was also done over 2 days on the 17th and 18th, and this is the 9th. 39%. That is bad. So, with more polling, we might get a better idea of what his cap is, but right now, to be coming in that low as an incumbent senator who has over 3/4 of the state knowing who, or just under 3/4 of the state having an opinion on him and knowing who he is, going up against an unknown opponent who has roughly the amount of people don't know who he is compared to the amount of people who know who Dan Sullivan is, that's not a good place to be. And here's where it gets worse. Now, I'm going to temper this because I've seen this number getting popped around a lot. If people know who Gross is, he's actually leading Sullivan 56-36. That's a Democratic safe seat, if that was the case. But I will make this note. If you know who Gross is, you're probably already going to vote for him. You're probably already leaning to the Democratic side of the ticket. So, don't take these numbers as gospel. This 20-point gap probably is actually going to be closer to, I'm guessing, once people get more of an opinion and hopefully we get some more polling out of Alaska, probably both of them will end up in the mid-40s, with the final election day, with the final polling results maybe giving the edge to Gross, if I'm being totally honest, given how heavily the national environment has shifted towards the Democrats and the fact Sullivan just is not polling well. And you can see this stretching throughout. Joe Biden's doing really well with independent voters, and Donald Trump's approval rating has already started to dip underwater with a 4% disapproval rating, or 3% disapproval rating. The state house race is also a toss-up, with the incumbent Senator Don Young losing to his challenger, Gavin, 43-41. That is not good as well. So there's one race where it looks like Democrats are leading, one race where it's probably a toss-up, and one race where Democrats are slightly behind. Not to mention the governor, Dunleavy, who looks like he's about to be removed from office. Well, actually, the polling says otherwise. Only 39% say they'd support removing him, while 46% oppose a move. People are not the biggest fans of using recall elections, where people like an incumbent governor, but they don't want to recall them because I have no idea. I think PPP makes a good analogy to Scott Walker's recall election. Recall elections usually fail just because people might be upset with the governor, or upset with a senator, or upset with the president, but that doesn't necessarily mean they would prefer the other guy. And that's what I think we're seeing right here. People don't like Dunleavy, but they don't want to remove him. But even so, the fact he's going to be on the ballot and the fact he doesn't even have 50% support to keep him in office isn't good. We're seeing Republicans struggling in Alaska. And this is not an uncommon dynamic for Alaska. Alaska, as I will say multiple times, is a very insular state. You vote for the state parties. Their independence party actually had a good run of it back in the 80s. And they like voting for national candidates who will not involve them in things. And I think that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing a Joe Biden who looks like he's going to leave Alaska alone. He's not going to he's going to reprotect the wildlife refuge and all that, and then just say, okay, Alaska, I'm not going to talk to you for 4 years, and we'll see where we are at that point, while Donald Trump keeps getting them involved in all of these, to put it overly comedically and simplistically, his shenanigans. If you want my total on it, and the reason why someone like Dunleavy's not doing a good job is he's gotten very nationalized in how he's been approaching the state, as opposed to being, well, I'm the governor of Alaska, it doesn't matter if I'm a Democrat or a Republican, I'm just going to put Alaska first. He's been very much pushing the national Republican agenda, which is not super popular in Alaska. Alaska likes their state run a certain way, and if you don't do that, you're not super popular. So that's part of the reason why Dunleavy's doing so poorly. If you want my honest opinion, Alaska actually has a ranked choice voting ballot initiative on the ballot, and I think that could very much kill the two-party system in Alaska, and could pave the way for Alaska creating their own sort of unique party, like how Quebec does in Canada, where they have a Liberal Party and a Conservative Party, but they are the Quebec parties first. You could see that happening with Alaska. You could have something like, I don't know, the White North, it could be some combination of the White North Conservative Party versus the Last Frontier left-wing party, Progressive Party, and then you've got some kind of middle ground Native Party that just focused on keeping it so Native Alaskans aren't bothered by the state government. But with that all being said, if you liked the video, leave a like down below as well as a comment. If you want to see more from this channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Otherwise, as always, have a wonderful day.